Fox Sports NBA analyst Chris Broussard joining us now. Chris, we have missed seeing you in studio. I know you've been home in Jersey for the last couple months, and I just want to start by asking your reaction to the protests, to everything that has been happening all across the country over the last week.
Well, thanks, Jenny. It is great to be back. Great to see all you guys, and I definitely miss you. But like everybody, I'm saddened by the destruction of the properties and the cities. The cities in America are burning, and that's very hard to watch. And I support the protesters without question, but I think it's gotten to a point where there are people of all races and all political stripes, and I even think people who are actually against the cause of African Americans and what we're fighting for, who are now looting and destroying these cities and these businesses, and they're using the death of George Floyd as an excuse to just wreak havoc and cause this destruction and steal merchandise. And that's very unfortunate that this is happening. But I will not sit here. I think it's cowardly if anyone condemns the protesters, even the violent ones, and yet they refuse or don't condemn the horrific acts and the lack of justice that has led to these protests. And that is, of course, whether it's Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, John Crawford, all the way up to George Floyd. Seeing these people on videotape, no less, murdered, and then the police who murdered them are either acquitted of their crimes or not charged at all. And that is what has led to this. And anyone condemning the looting and all of that, you must also condemn what has led to it. And that started it, so that should be condemned even in stronger terms. I also think people need to realize that the people who are looting and destroying these properties and breaking the law, and it is wrong, breaking the law, they are only following the example that they have seen set by many of these police officers all the way up to the highest levels. When you saw what happened with George Floyd, those were policemen who are paid to uphold the law, disregarding the law, disregarding it to the point where they could kill a man in broad daylight while they know they're being videotaped. They have such little regard for the law that they could do that. And then we saw in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery. We know the police department there had the videotape for months, and they were going to let the killers go free. Where is their respect for the law? And only a month ago, and I don't even like typically going here, but only a month ago, month and a half ago, the president was encouraging protesters in Michigan, in Minnesota, in Virginia to break the law, to protest against the stay-at-home orders, which was the law at that time. And when armed militias with assault weapons went to Michigan and other states and protested against the law, they were encouraged by the White House to do that. So my point is, when you see people at the highest levels, from the police department to the White House, who have no regard for the law, don't get mad at the people that have been pushed to the bottom rung of society, who are downtrodden, when they have no regard for the law. This is anarchy, unfortunately. Like I said, I hate seeing this. This is anarchy from the streets on up to the White House, from the hood to the White House. This is anarchy, and it's tough to watch.
It is, Chris. But George Floyd was probably what we call the straw that broke the camel back. Because if you go back in history, as you mentioned, there have been so many Walter Scotts and so many Athena Jefferson and so many that go unpunished. And we go back, Skip, even when citizens would kill black men in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they would get an all-white jury, and they would be on in 10 minutes. They'd have the trial one day, and the jury would deliberate for 10 minutes, and then they go scot-free. And people are like, well, hold on, wait a minute, where is our justice? You say justice is supposed to be blind, but we understand that when black people come up that step, Lady Justice is peeking out from under that blindfold, like, okay, you black, oh no, we gonna hold you. They say justice is like shackles and cobwebs. They say it's like shackles for a black or minority because you're held more accountable. They say for our white counterparts, it's like cobwebs. It's easily brushed aside. And so we're seeing that. And people can only take so much. I don't care how peaceful, how, man of faith, every man has a breaking point. And what we're seeing is that we're seeing year after year after year, police do this over and over again with no accountability. And then people are like, oh, hold on, wait a minute. If we don't do something, Skip, riot, America, when you started this, you looted this land. How you think you got it? How you think you got in power? How do you think you became a superpower? Oh, this is peaceful now. You look, this is what we want you to do. Just hear what, no, you took it. And when they didn't listen, you bombed, you pillaged, you looted. So we just, black America just learned from the best. You've been firebombing us in the 60s and the 50s to try to hold us in place, burning our churches, burning our homes. And now, as Malcolm X once said, the chickens have come home to roost, you're upset. You encourage this behavior. And then when it's turned on you, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I can't believe you guys. You doing this in George Floyd's arm? No. George Floyd was the vehicle that finally pushed people over the edge that said, I've had enough and I'm not going to take it anymore. So that's what this was about. As you said, Chris, I think the thing is that with black America, what we feel and the anger and the frustration, if you go back and check the history, as I spoke about it yesterday, Skip, 64 until today, every riot that black America has participated in was because of the killing of an unarmed black man. Period. Go back and look at it. From the 60s, 64, 65 on forward. It was because of that. And so what? And Skip, and we appreciate our white counterparts coming along with us. But if you notice, Skip, whites have never had to protest or had to be at the forefront of a protest because there were never obstacles put in front of them. They always had rights, civil rights. They always had education. They always had housing. They always had voting. So they had, what were you going to protest? You want more of what you already got? That's why we protest. We protest to be heard. That's it. Go ahead, Skip.
So, Chris Broussard, now that we're seeing worldwide protests over George Floyd, we're seeing London and Paris and Berlin and on, that somehow this has seized the attention of the world, not just the black community in America. Can you see any good coming out of this as something positive that we can take away? Could this be a watershed moment in race relations?
Well, Skip, I saw you earlier in the segment before talking about how you're encouraged that, you see so many whites involved in the protest. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. That has been encouraging to see whites and non-blacks joining in this. I was saying to my wife last night, this kind of reminds me of how in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, part of their strategy, Dr. King, Martin Luther King, and others, was to, as they marched non-violently, they knew that the police were going to be violent with them. And they wanted the entire world to see how they were having dogs sicked on them. They were being beaten down by the cops. They were having water hoses and fire hoses shot at them. They knew that when people, and white people saw that they would be moved to action and try to change it. And I think that's what this was. It's very unfortunate. It's ridiculous that it had to take this. But for people to see what happened with George Floyd in broad daylight, I think a lot of white people saw it and were like, my goodness, this is just blatant disregard and blatant racism. And that has moved a lot of people to action. But what I'd say, Skip, is that people have to realize this is not just about George Floyd, and it's not even just about police brutality. This is about a system that economically and educationally and in terms of justice has put African Americans at the bottom. And those things need to be addressed too. I've talked about it. Look, people get upset. They got upset with affirmative action for blacks, you know, which we've had for what, 40, 50 years. White people have had 400 years of affirmative action. And I can go by with the very acts, the Homestead Act, the racist enforcement of the Social Security Act, the GI Bill, the Federal Housing Administration loans in the mid-20th century that created the white suburbs and made things better for them while they redlined the black neighborhood. And so there needs to be an intentional effort to uplift the masses of black people who are stuck in poverty and feel disenfranchised and hopeless. All of them aren't going to be great athletes like Shannon Sharpe, you know? And so there needs to be that type of undertaking and that people, for us to have a big change in this country. Hopefully this leads to it, because I have heard governors mention, look, this has been going on for decades. This goes back to slavery. They're not, I've heard some not just make it an isolated incident and understand this is a pattern of how African Americans have been treated since we've been in this country. And so that's what it's going to take to make a lasting effort. Right now, everybody's emotional, everybody's, you know, engaged, but it's going to take the hard work of changing laws to really right this situation.
You're exactly right, Chris. As Dr. King said, we ask a bootless man to pull himself up by his bootstraps. You see, when the slaves were freed, he was free. And Dr. King said he's free to what? You gave him no land. You gave him nothing. So to famine. So it wasn't like the Irish, okay, if you go west, whatever you settle upon, you could have. What do we get? Oh, you can be a sharecropper. You can stay here. You won't make any money, but you'll have a tin roof and wooden floors so you can somewhere you can stay. But you got to work for me for nothing. Huh? And then when you needed money, guess what? You had to stay, and then your kids was born into that, and their kids was born into that. No. So you're talking, I agree with you 1,000%, Chris. They've had a 400-year head start, and they expect us to catch up because what they do, Skip, well, you got Michael Jordan. You had a black president for 8 years. Huh? That's only us. We're allowed to get 1 or 2, 3 successful, and that's supposed to make up for the 45 million of us. Well, that's enough. I mean, you had a black president, you got Oprah, you got Michael Jordan, you got LeBron. I mean, what else you need? Really? We need an opportunity to acquire wealth and have generational wealth, like the gap that's been provided to them before we even got started in the race.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.